he's mature. He's still going to mature, I think, in the next few years. I think he's still learning the tactics of racing better. So I think he's still only going to get better.
Just quickly, the green jersey competition, of course, has been locked away. Alessandro Pataki has got that over Mark Cavendish, a fast-finishing Mark Cavendish. Let's just relive the final moments, Dave. And it was Brett Lancaster and Tor Hushoff. They were going for it in the early part of that final sprint.
Yeah, look, I mean, Brett Lancaster, he's done a great job the last 2 days. But look at that. That's what I'm talking about. He is that much faster. I mean, we haven't seen that for, I think, quite a few years. Someone being so much quicker, so dominant. He's won 4 stages 2 years ago, 6 last year, and now 5 this year. That is incredible.
What about the tactics, the way he hung on the wheel of the green jersey and Tor Hushoff? He doesn't need to train anymore, surely.
Well, that's what's impressive. I mean, we've seen how he's really relied on his HTC teammates, and of course we all give Mark Renshaw big raps, but he has proved that he can win just about from any situation. So he is a superstar.
Ruben Alberto Contador, as we've mentioned, 3 victories here in the Tour. And somebody asked him last night in the press room if this was his most satisfying of all the tours. And he said, yeah, it was pretty good. And he brought back, tears started flowing. But, you know, he always goes back to the Tour Down Under back in 2005 as one of his greatest achievements after that horrific injury.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's easy to sort of think that he may just say that when he's at the Tour Down Under just for the sake of, you know, making South Australian government feel happy about owning the race. But in many ways, he really does mean that. I did an interview with him just before this year's Tour de France, and he actually spoke very, very deep about what that win at Wollonga really meant to him, meant to his team as well. And, you know, it's easy just to forget that when we see his success now, to see him so strong. But every great thing starts from something simple. It's like with Lance Armstrong. He was at that moment of his life where he could have gone 2 ways. And unfortunately, well, for his health, he went the right way. But also, what we're seeing now is very much the fruition of how much he fell in love with the sport and how much he appreciates the opportunities that the sport gives him now.
Yeah, 5 stage wins for Mark Cavendish as we relive the moments of this final sprint. And it was all about the Cervelo test team in the early part. Lamprey colours were also in there. Not many colours, Dave, from HCC Columbia. And Mark Cavendish did it all on his own, but the ease of the victory and that side shot, the cameras following the sprinters, just an extraordinary piece of television, and we really did see how easy the victory was in the end.
Yeah, look, we certainly did, and as I said a couple of moments ago, for me it goes back to that first stage victory at this Tour de France for Mark Cavendish, and when he got on the podium and the tears flowed, it just showed the weight that was off his shoulders, the pressure that he was carrying. I mean, let's face it, he's still a young boy, you know, and so he had a lot of pressure on him, a lot of the scrutiny that the media were putting on him, the pressure, you know. Are you finished? The French media were saying, he's done, we're not going to see this guy again. And once he got that monkey off the back, geez, did he soak it up and did the confidence grow, and we saw it here. And look, I like him a lot more now than what I did a couple of years ago. You know, I didn't dislike him, but I thought he was a little bit too confident. I think we're seeing a rider really come of age.
Dave and Rupert, I'll throw something up at you now. Dave and I did a little bit of research, which is probably hard to believe for some, but look, the Giro d'Italia, if you look at the GC at the Tour de France this year, none of the top 10 riders competed at the Giro this year. That tells me a lot. It tells me that perhaps in 2010 you can't back up and do 2 Grand Tours in a row. Rup, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think obviously that does sort of back that argument up. I mean, it's worth bearing in mind that this year's Giro d'Italia was an exceptionally difficult one, not just because of the course, which was always, you know, technically much harder than the Tour de France, but it was the way that the peloton and the riders embraced the race. They really, really raced hard, and we saw at the end of the day, a lot of those riders were planning their recovery periods rather than their training. And I still think a lot of those guys did come into the Tour de France overcooked a bit. Although, just to give Cadel Evans credit, I mean, you know, he's been put out by his elbow. He still feels that otherwise he would have still been, you know, in the fray of this Tour de France. And it's sort of one of those things I would love to have seen just to get the answer to that. But we've got to move on. And I think in the aftermath of that, we will start seeing riders reevaluate, though, their preparation or maybe how they race the Giro d'Italia.
All right, we'll talk about that some more, David, but now we can cross to Mark Cavendish, the stage winner.
Obviously, after the first week, it was looking further and further away from even winning the stage. And but, you know, like I said, the team just kept going. It could have been easy to change plan or give up, but, you know, they kept on working 100%, putting the GC chances at hold on that, and finally got the first win, and then it just came in a roll like that. And, you know, it kind of gathers momentum. You get more confidence, you win more. That gives you more confidence, you win more. And that's how it works. And yeah, today was just the pinnacle, you know. a lot of people said, oh, you can still get the green in Paris, but you know, I kept saying, you know, that'll be either good luck on my part or bad luck on Alessandro if that happens. Today it was just about focusing on winning here again, and you know, on the for me, the most beautiful finish in the world. It's an icon. You ask anybody who doesn't really follow cycling to name one stage of the Tour de France, and they'll always say the finish in the Champs-Élysées. It's an icon of the sport, and to win here is pretty spectacular. So.
2 in 2 years as well, Mark. A very rare achievement. They were very different wins. Can you compare them?
Not really. You just said they're very different wins.
But last year, of course, Colombia, it was a textbook lead-out. You bashed Garmin to one side and did the job. This year, once again, you had to improvise.
Well, I didn't have to improvise too much. You know, I always had guys looking after us. We had Tony Martin in the break, and he just sat there and he was able to save himself in the break. He didn't have to ride. We got the break back, and then Bernie was keeping me on the side of the lead-out trains the last lap. It takes a hell of a lot of energy. We're going 65 kilometres an hour in the whole last lap, you know. And then Bernie's job was finished under the tunnel. Came out of the tunnel. I just saw Tony by chance, a couple of people ahead of me. I thought he was out, and I was like, oh, brilliant. He came out, and he took me up. Perfect time, and he took me about 800 to about 600 and dropped me on Pataki's wheel. And Pataki's sweeper tried to knock me out, but you know, held strong, took the last corner, and once I knew I was in that position last corner, I knew it was just about when I was going to kick, you know, and I could have gone a little bit earlier, I think, but I didn't. So now I'm really happy, really happy with that. You know, it's the perfect ending to the tour, and yeah, we're looking forward to celebrating it tonight.
Sure, you wanted on the podium. Well done, Mark.
Thank you.
Yeah, very emotional Mark Cavendish there, a 5-time winner of the 2010 Tour de France. We've got a special guest with us, Simon Gerrans, who unfortunately his tour ambitions, well, they collapsed very, very early. Great to have you on our part of our coverage, Simon. First of all, I want to ask you about Mark Cavendish, a mongrel on the bike, but he comes across as being quite humble and shows a lot of emotion off it.
Yeah, definitely. Cav's a super emotional guy, and we saw that after he won his first stage. He had a lot of pressure on himself, and he just burst into tears in relief. And I think then we've seen him win 4 stages on pure confidence.
Yeah. Well, what about you? We look at your arm, doesn't look too good. You told us earlier that you've got some big ambitions this year, the Vuelta and of course the World Championships. Will you be back to your regular form?
Oh, well, hopefully from here on I can work towards racing the Tour of Spain. They've still got to make a selection in the Sky team of who will be racing, but I think that's the perfect way to prepare for the World Championships. So, yeah, I'll focus on that from here on.
Well, Simon, and you too, Dave, you can chime in. We started with 11 Australians in this year's Tour de France. We're down to 8 through injury and suspensions. Not a bad record, actually. It is a record in Tour de France history. But what about the results? We didn't get too many. And I just wonder if that's a bad thing, given the high turnover of riders here in the race.
Look, not at all. I think you know, the positive thing about that is that now we expect so much from the Aussies because we're getting all of these results. We had two guys who potentially could win the Tour de France in Cadel Evans and Michael Rogers. Guys like Simon here, you know, Mark Renshaw obviously being DQ'd, you know, but potential stage winners across the board. So our expectations are so high now with the Aussies. 5 years ago, we would have been happy to have 3 or 4 Australians in the race. So, you know, I think not at all. I think it's good to have the guys here. You have to take the punches, don't you? And the boys will be back, I'm sure, next year.
Well, he's making his way to the podium right now. He's a living legend, one might say, because he's won 15 stages in the Tour de France. Mark Cavendish, the stage winner here on the Champs-Élysées.
Le Britannique Mark Cavendish.
Voilà, félicité par les hôtesses Powerbar en présence de Paul Boulk, président directeur général de Nestlé et Bertrand Delanoë.
Yeah, he's got the big smile on his face, Mark Cavendish, and I dare say we're going to see him for quite a long time. But just on the Aussies, Simon, it is in a healthy state, you feel, Australian cycling?
Yeah, definitely. I think if you look at past results and you see some of the work that the Aussies did in this year's Tour de France, hate to think how many hundreds of kilometres Stuart O'Grady did in the front. Also, we saw Matt Lloyd doing some fantastic work in the mountains, and Mark Renshaw doing some great lead-outs while he was in the race. So I think Australian cycling is in a really healthy state.
Tell me, we threw up the conversation regarding the Giro and the Tour de France, and whether in this day and age, whether it's possible to successfully compete in both. Dave and I checked out the top 10 of the GC here at the Tour, and not one rider competed at the Giro earlier this year.
I think this year was a little bit special in the fact that the Giro d'Italia was so tough, and all comments after the Giro was how fatigued everybody was, and I think that short month between the two races wasn't enough to recover. So with that retrospect, yeah, the Giro wasn't the best preparation this year.